So recently I started watching Overlord, and I wanted to talk about it a little bit. So what's this show about? Well, to start with, it's an isekai. I know what you're going to say, but Ash, isekai anime is the worst thing since botulism. It's the same thing over and over in an endless repeat of boring protagonists and harem plotlines. Well, I say to you, dear viewer, this is a rare occasion when that's not entirely true. See, Overlord isn't your usual, I'm going to save the world with the power of friendship and rainbows. It's a different take on that. The protagonist is Momonga. He's the guild leader of one of the highest ranking guilds, Ainzul Gon, of a game called Yggdrasil Online. It's a full dive MMORPG that's on the verge of closing down. His guild members have slowly dropped out of the game and he's ultimately left alone waiting for the servers to shut down. But when the timer reaches 0, he realises he's still in character. What's more, all of the guild's NPCs have woken up. They're now sentient, and the guild base, the Great Tomb of Nazareth, which they built with his friends, has been relocated to this unknown world. So, the show's a great divergence from the isekai format because it deviates from the usual, I'm an OP high schooler who's been reincarnated, I'm a complete Mary Sue, I have no flaws, and I'm going to save the world just because it's the right thing to do. No. Overlord's protagonist chooses a darker path. He resorts to manipulation, torture, and eventually just all-out war to further his pursuit of his old guildmates. In the first season, Ainz has a lot of inner dialogue. He's conflicted about how he's now put into this villainous role, and he's got this new body that's an undead that fortunately has the ability to sort of subdue his emotions and calm him down. This whole inner dialogue does eventually fade, and he becomes fully this dreaded overlord leader of Nazareth. The interesting part about the show is that it also has multiple viewpoints. So sometimes you'll be seeing the view of the enemies of Nazareth. Sometimes it will be the perspective from Ainz's own eyes. And occasionally you also get glimpses, or more often than not, you get views from his newfound subordinates and their views on how Ainz is developing or how they worship him or things like that. These subordinates are some of the most interesting parts of the show. They're varied and interesting, slowly and subtly changing throughout the runtime of the show. I find myself very attached to some of these characters, despite their abhorrent and sometimes cruel actions and mindsets. They're very anti-human. They rear them as inferior life forms and that sort of thing. This is also where the it's not your average isekai anime argument sort of cracks a little. Overlord's got the occasional appearance of plot, and though it's not to the extent of its competitors, and it's usually quite relevant to the storyline. There are NPC characters that are clearly based on specific fetishes, though this is explainable by the fact that they were created by MMO players and they're not exactly known for their subtlety. Shaltir is a good example of this. She's a gothic true vampire who's a Lolita, who's repeatedly called out for her padded chest, her blatant sadistic and masochistic traits on display forever, and if the light novels is believed, she may be a necrophiliac. So every NPC has some sort of characteristic that plays into the players who created them, and it makes them so much more likable. Because if you've ever played an MMO or indulged in any sort of fandom where people create OCs, you'll recognize some of these traits, and I personally love the designs of the characters and their little quirks. So now we're going to sort of get into the elephant in the room. The anime is blatantly a power trip. Ainz is OP as hell with access to the highest tier of magic, which is the 10th tier in this universe. Bearing in mind, most people in the world he finds himself in can only use up to 6th tier, and that's only if they're incredibly powerful and have trained for years. But although Ainz is stupidly powerful, the fight scenes do a really good job of having the magic seem awesome and never boring. It's all very flashy and weighty. What makes this even better is that some of the magic at Ainz's disposal doesn't work the same way as it does in Yggdrasil. So he has to sort of figure out how to use this magic. So in the show's first season, there's a really good viewpoint of this where Ainz has to use a magic mirror to spy on some people. And it doesn't exactly work because he hasn't got the UI that you would have in the game. He has to sort of figure out how to use it using only his magic. And so he has to completely relearn how to use it. I also want to touch on the art style of the anime a little bit because it's absolutely stunning. Backgrounds are sort of static and beautifully drawn, with the characters inserted in a way that doesn't seem too unnatural. But I'm no artist, so that might be completely wrong. Um, but it does look amazing. And the world really comes to life when you see the characters interacting or sort of in the world as it is. I put a lot of stock into how pretty an anime is. Not that that can completely stop me from watching an anime, but it's just nicer when you've got some pretty pictures to look at. As such, it took me 2 attempts to watch Overlord, mostly because there is on occasion a little bit of CGI that's not very good, and that's usually kept for monsters and the like. And we all know how CGI can spoil a good anime. Looking at you, Fate Stay Night. Yes, it was good. I will fight you. So, when I saw that first opening shot of the adventurers besieging the Great Tomb with an army of really badly CGI'd skeletons put in front of them, I closed it down and went back to my usual slice of life stuff. But I am glad I pushed past it because I found a really unique anime. And the voice acting is genuinely fantastic, with Hino Satoshi, who you might know as Rengoku from Demon Slayer, Fire Guy, yellow hair, red streaks, does a fantastic job of portraying both Ainzul Gon, clever and ruthless overlord, who has this very deep and booming voice. And in the first seasons, at least, he also plays the little bit remnant of a human that remains inside the Overlord, thinking, "Oh God, how can I do this?" That sort of thing. I'm kind of obsessed with voice actors and actresses, and I've held my friends hostage in Discord for, well, longer than I'm proud to admit, to talk about different voice actors in the show we're currently watching. So that's to say, I'm going to yap about the different talent in the show a little bit. Obviously, the next person I'm going to talk about is Halo Yumi, the voice of Albedo, the imp second in command of Nazarick. In the first episode of the anime, Ainz changes her backstory because every NPC has like a backstory that defines their personality and all that. And he changes it from her being a bitch or a slut, depending on your translation, to having her be madly in love with him. And Hara does a really good job of portraying this really obsessive but strict and loyal character. I personally don't like Albedo. I find her a bit annoying and she keeps butting into conversations where she really shouldn't. But I do appreciate the talent that goes into creating the voice of her character. She also hosts loads of other talented talent, such as Usaka Sumire, who voices the aforementioned Shaltir Bloodfallen. She also voiced Dekamori Sane from Chunibyu Love and Other Delusions, as well as Nagatoro from the ever popular Don't Bully Me Nagatoro. Another voice actor that you may know in Overlord is Mieno Mamoru, who voices one of my favourite cringy characters in Overlord, Pandora's Actor, who is created by Ainz and a bit of his dark past. You might recognise Mieno from Steins Gate, where he played Rintaro Okabe, the mad scientist. There's so many talented seiyus in this show that I couldn't possibly gush over all in one video, because otherwise the video would be unreasonably long and it probably wouldn't be very interesting. But some closing thoughts. I want to tell you to give this anime a shot if you're tired of the whole good as gold isekai anime that's currently sort of plaguing the anime scene. The show does a really good job portraying the occasional grotesque subjects with which it deals, and it has a great cast of characters that are, for the most part, likable and easy to get attached to, though I would not encourage this with anyone outside of the main cast because they tend to drop like flies when you least expect it. The only criticism that I can really make about it is that they do pull some solutions out of their butts a little bit. Sort of like, "Oh, you did that. Well, that's not going to work because I have this," kind of deal. But it never feels cheap and is almost always sort of backed up by a flashback or by some previous dialogue or lore that was explained before the fight or whatever. I don't think it detracts too much from the enjoyability of the show. It comes with the sort of territory because the original author, Kugani Maruyama, originally had the idea for this show, or this light novel or web novel as it was, by writing a D&D campaign that sort of never took off. He never found the players. And so it suffers from a lot of and then storytelling. And it's also why you'll find that a lot of the spells or skills in the show either resemble or are flat-out copies of D&D spells. There's a certain depth to the story of Overlord. The lore runs surprisingly deep. If you do decide to give it a go and watch it and enjoy it, I would highly recommend either buying the light novels or seeking out translations of the web novel, because yeah, as I said before, it did start out as a web novel, because there's a lot of information that's obviously not in the anime because it would be way too long and it would take way too long to explain. So, that was Overlord. There's 4 seasons out at the moment and a movie, which I actually haven't seen yet. So much for researching fully before this video. So, if you decide to give it a go and or have already done so, feel free to let me know what you think about it in the comments below. And thank you for watching. I hope you have a great day. Bye. Shows a great divergence from the usual isekai. The show is a great divergence from the usual isekai format because it deviates from the usual "I'm a reincarnated," such as Uesaka Sumire, who voices the aforementioned Bloodshare. Bloodshare? What the fuck am I talking about? But as for there's a certain depth to the story of Overlord. The lore runs surprisingly deep, so if you give it, well, that's fucked.